Hey everybody, Paul Mack here. I've got another question from a viewer. This is from Alexander Paynes, 1754. Alexander asks, do you use heritage varieties, local varieties, or more modern? He's talking about the seeds or the vegetables I grow in my garden here. He says, and do you save your own seed? It would be fantastic to hear your perspective on these from a small-scale farmer's point of view. Well, yes, Alexander, I do save my own seed, and I do grow a lot of heirloom vegetable varieties, some of which have been in my family. One of them, a cowpea variety, has been in my family for well over 150 years. So, yeah, I do save my own seeds, and I grow heirloom varieties. Now, saving your own seed is not complicated at all, but the methods do differ from vegetable type to vegetable type. There's different ways to save different seeds from different type of vegetables. First thing that matters a lot is the plant that you're saving the seed from. You want to pick a plant generally that's, the best of the whole crop to save your seeds, because if there's anything good happening with that vegetable, or genetically speaking, those are the things you want to pass on and you want to propagate to the next generation of vegetables that you're going to be growing, especially if you're trying to improve a variety or adapt it to your region or your particular farm. Everybody's environment is different, and when you're saving seeds, if you practice a few really common sense things, you can put a little bit of English on that vegetable and actually help it to be a better vegetable for your particular area. And it's just a lot of fun to be able to do that. It's just tons of fun for the farmer. And not only can you, put that English on a particular vegetable and make it a better vegetable, but you can actually take any certain crop and make it more suitable to your own desires, characteristics that you might want in a certain vegetable that maybe your neighbor or somebody else doesn't necessarily care about. You can actually enhance those things just through observation. For instance, there's an old-fashioned chore on the farm that not many people know about anymore, and it, of course, in my region of the South, it was called topping corn, because back in the day, along with hay and shelled corn, whatever else you might be growing for your livestock, the actual corn stalk was used as fodder, F-O-D-D-E-R. It was livestock feed, and it would be cut. The top of those stalks would be cut above the top ear. You would just take a cane knife and you would cut that stalk from the top ear on up and just lay it on the ground and let it cure like you would when you're curing hay in the hot summertime. After a day or two, you'd go and gather those stalks, tie them up into bundles, and then you might set those bundles upright, several bundles together, into a shock in the field and let it continue to cure and dry in the hot summer sun until you were able to load them on the wagon or the truck and take them to the loft and put them up for the winter so that you could feed the livestock in the winter. That was called topping corn. And to some extent, I practice that here when I can. I don't, at the moment, don't have a lot of room to be growing corn. I hope to in the future. But from time to time, I will go out in August, about the time the corn stalks start to turn yellow, and I'll go through and top the corn. And so for me personally, when I'm growing the corn and when I'm looking and going through about this time of year, which is almost 4th of July, I'll go out and I'll start picking the stalks that I want to save seed corn for. And I'm looking for something very particular, since I want it to have ears, obviously. That's a good thing. Big, nice roasting type ears is good. Preferably, I like 2 ears to a stalk. It doesn't always happen, but when I see that happening, I'll usually pick the seed from that particular stalk. Now, for one thing, I want the ears on the corn to be situated down lower on the stalk, and I want the distance from the top ear to the tassel to be as long as possible. So I'll go through and compare the stalks and find the one that kind of matches that criteria, and I'll mark that one for seed. And after a while, after several seasons of doing that and saving the seed from the very best, you'll start to find that after a while you're going to get more stalks that have double ears that or both are hopefully are fully developed, and you'll start to see those characteristics of, for me, that taller space between the top ear and the tassel on more and more stalks. So pretty soon I have developed my own variety of whatever particular corn that is throwing off those particular traits that I myself like. And you could do the same thing with your own corn. If you wanted less space between, if you're not going to top your corn and you wanted your ears up tall and you wanted less space between the tassel, or maybe you don't want it to put a lot of energy into the stalk. Maybe you want all your energy into the corn, and so you're going to pick shorter stalks of corn. Or if you're a short person and you want your ears low to the ground and the stalks and everything small, you'll pick seed for that. And over time, that particular variety you're growing will throw off more and more of that type of corn. It's a lot of fun to do that. It's a whole lot of fun. Let's say I'm going through and I'm picking the particular tomato vines that I want to save seeds from. I might look at which stalks actually had tomatoes on them that ripened first. There's always one that turns red before the others, and I might mark that vine and say, hey, that one's earlier. And then if I plant seeds from that one, I might get an earlier tomato. Maybe you want a later tomato. Maybe you don't want to be bothered by early tomatoes. You'll pick the later one. Or maybe you want big tomatoes or medium size for canning. You're not interested in big tomatoes. Or maybe you're looking for vines that are more insect tolerant on whatever you plant. Those are all things to consider. And the more you propagate and allow those vines to flourish, the more of them you'll see in the future. It's just it's a whole lot of fun. But, in general, if you don't care about any of that, just pick your seeds from the best plant you've got and you'll be fine. You really will. Now, doing all this observation and looking at what plants are the best and which ones you want to save the seeds from, it's a good thing to journal everything you do, when you planted something, when you transplanted it, when the first ripening was, and you can go back on your records and see, okay, this one actually took a very short time to mature. I like that. I'm going to save the seeds from this one. So again, it's a good reminder to always be journaling everything you do. Write down everything that happens. You never know what little bit of information is going to be useful several months down the road, and you think, oh, I wish I'd written down that when that bloomed, or when that first ripened, or when I planted it, or whatever. So that's always a good tip. Now, having said all that, let's get particular about how to save seeds from certain type of vegetables. We're just going to name a few, and we're going to start first of all with the simplest things to save seed from, and probably the easiest vegetable I know to save the seed from. There's probably several, but one of them is for sure okra, or okra as it's called everywhere but the South. Basically, all you do is toward the end of the season, when you've eaten a bunch of okra off a stalk, and you kind of frankly tired of picking it, you let a few remain on the stalk, let them grow big and tough like they normally do, and then they'll start turning gray. Just let them turn gray. Once they're good and dry and they rattle really well, you hear the seeds rattling around, you can pick those and just open up the pods, do a little twist on them. The seeds fall right out into a dishpan or a bucket. You're done. Put them in an envelope, bag, paper bag or whatever, and save them until next year. That's easy enough. All right, how about corn? We talked a little bit about corn already. Basically, with corn, you let it cure or dry on the stalk throughout summer, maybe late August, September, maybe if you're a little more northern regions, on into the 1st of October. That's when you'll want to pull the corn. And the way to test to see if corn is dry enough is you can kind of part that shuck with your fingernails. You kind of tear it open and you can look at the kernels there. And if you mash on them with your fingernail and they're still kind of soft and they give a little bit, or they're still milky, it's too early to pull that for seed. You want them to be very, very hard kernels. And when you see that, then it's ready to pull, and you can leave the shuck on them if you want and shell them the following year when you're ready to plant, or just shell them and put them in a bag and keep the weevils and stuff out of them, that's for sure. Now notice a while ago I said pull corn and not pick corn. The proper terminology, especially in the South, is pulling corn. You pick a guitar, you pick beans, you pick your nose, but you pull corn. So keep that in mind, especially if you're ever around any old timers, because they're going to make fun of you for saying he picks his corn, he didn't pull it. Actually, I don't even know if there's hardly any old timers left that know that anymore, except for me. And if you say pick corn, I'm not going to make fun of you. At least not to your face. All right, so the next group of vegetables are the melons. Watermelons, cantaloupes, even peppers, things like that. You can, even while you're preparing that pepper, cutting it open, you can scrape those seeds out, set them aside on a paper plate or on a paper towel, let them dry. Especially watermelons. Everybody, when they're eating watermelons, 4th of July, or eating cantaloupes, they'll scrape those seeds on a paper towel or a handkerchief or whatever, put them on a plate or something, and let them dry. Pretty soon you'll have seeds that are ready. Put them in a jar, put them in a paper sack, and you'll be ready for next year. So they're pretty easy to save seeds from, the okra, the corn, and the melons and so forth and things like that. And what about peanuts? Does anybody grow peanuts anymore besides me? I mean, they're a lot of fun. You grow those nice big green vines, and then when they're ready later in the summer, before fall, you can pull those vines, hang them up in a dry area in your workshop or in a barn loft. By the way, for those of you that don't know, the peanuts actually grow underground, kind of like a potato. When you pull those vines up, they're stuck to the vine. They're a little bit dirty, so knock the dirt off and just hang them up and let them cure in a dry spot in your workshop, up on the wall or in the attic or in the loft of a barn or something. You don't want to eat peanuts that you've just pulled out of the ground. You need to let them cure a little bit until they're, just till the shells are dry and they maybe have a little bit of a rattle to them. And when they're dry that way, I mean, you can just leave them up in the loft, and the following year when you're ready to plant, just pull some more peanut, the ones you didn't eat or parch or, roast or whatever. You can just pull those peanuts off and your seed is ready to go. So that's an easy one to save too, the peanut. And there's a lot of, they taste really good. They're good to parch, lightly roast. They're delicious. It makes a great wintertime snack, anytime snack. And you can do a lot of things with a peanut. Just ask George Washington Carver. One more easy crop to save seeds from is the turnip. Everybody in the South loves a good turnip green, and turnips mixed in there with them, and they're really easy to save the seeds from. Generally, you plant turnips in the fall, about August, September, and then they'll grow, and you can pick off the greens in the fall. The turnips will survive our winters here in the South, and long about spring, they'll start sending up a green stalk, and pretty soon it'll have a bunch of yellow blooms, beautiful yellow blooms all over it, and then where the blooms were, there'll be little seed pods, and once those dry, about June, I think, somewhere in there, May, June, once those dry, take those tops and just kind of crinkle them into a dish pan. The seed pods shatter and the seeds fall into the pan. Then you can winnow them with an electric fan or out in the wind, and you've cleaned your seeds off. You're ready to go again. They're really easy to save seeds. The only problem is, usually where I've planted greens, I don't want to let them sit there and go to seed in the spring, because I need that ground to be planting the next crop. And so what you can do, if you don't want them to grow there, you can take those bulbs before they start to, or shortly after they start to send up that stalk, before preferably, take those bulbs, pull them out of the ground, move them and transplant them somewhere out of the way where they can grow and go to seed on their own, and then you can replant this area where they grew all winter. And you can still save the seeds from your turnips. That's just a handy little tip. So secondly, let's talk about some vegetables that maybe aren't quite as easy to save the seeds on. Number one, the cucumber. Now, the thing about the cucumber seeds, when you open them up, when you see those little seeds there, they're surrounded with this filmy, jello-like jelly substance. Makes them kind of hard to grab. They slip out of your fingers. So to save the seeds from a cucumber, you've got to get all that gelatin stuff off of them. Well, the first thing to do when saving cucumber seeds is you're going to want to, after the season, after your growing season for the cucumbers is slowly coming to the end, the vines are starting to kind of give up. You've put up a lot of pickles over the last few weeks and eaten your share of cucumbers. Well, then you're going to want to save some of the biggest, best shaped, nice long cucumbers and leave them on the vine. Let them turn golden yellow there. You know how they get. And then after they've turned gold yellow, you'll go through and pick those, and you carry them to a nice shady spot. You'll want to have you a chair, a bucket, a knife, and a spoon, and maybe some iced tea. And you take a cucumber, and with your butcher knife, very carefully, you don't want to cut yourself, you cut it lengthways so that it opens right up. And then you can take your spoon and you just scrape out the seeds that are kind of ganged up in the middle along the core. You scrape out those seeds into the bucket. And you just do that with every half of a cucumber that you cut open. And pretty soon you've got this mush in the bottom of the bucket with a whole bunch of cucumber seeds in it. You add a little bit of rainwater if possible, and maybe, about half full, 5-gallon bucket, half full of water. And you might just lightly put a lid or a covering over the top to keep the flies out, and just set it in a shady spot, not a hot spot, a cool spot in your workshop or wherever. Now it's going to smell after a day or two, so just be aware of that. I wouldn't keep it on the kitchen table or anything. But after a day or two or three, you want to kind of watch it. Pretty soon it starts fermenting, it starts rotting. There's some rot going on. And basically what's happening is that gelatin-like substance is getting more liquidy, and it's falling off the seeds. And when it's about right, after 2-3 days, maybe a little longer, just keep an eye on it. You can kind of swoosh that around. That's going to smell terrible. I'm warning you. You were warned. It's going to smell terrible. Swoosh that around, and those seeds will kind of separate from the gunk. And then you go out, preferably away from your house and preferably downwind of your front porch, and you pour that rot off in the woods. Then put you some fresh water in there, stir it around. The rot, whatever rot is left, kind of floats to the top again. Keep pouring it off and keep pouring in fresh water until pretty soon all you've got left is fresh, clean water and seeds that are basically on the bottom. Generally, any seeds that might be floating are probably no good anyway, so just let those pour on out with the rot and everything else. And then you can take a piece of mesh, sometimes onions are sold in a mesh bag. Sometimes that's good, as long as the mesh is the holes are not so big the seeds fall through. And you can pour those seeds on that mesh and wring the water out, and then just spread that mesh out on a plate and let them dry, not in the sun, but in a dry area of your workshop. Or again, it's going to smell, so I wouldn't do it inside. And just kind of spread those seeds out so that they dry evenly on that plate. And then once they're dried, a few days later, your seeds are ready to put in an envelope or a paper bag or however you keep them, and you're ready for the next year. So that's the cucumbers. Now, tomatoes are really similar. In fact, it's pretty much the same. There's just not as much volume of stuff when you're dealing with cutting tomatoes open and getting the seeds out. So when you've saved the tomatoes that you want for seed, you can take a sharp knife and you want to cut that tomato. If the stem is on top, you want to cut that tomato in half that way. And that opens up, exposes all the little chambers inside each half a tomato. And you'll take a little spoon, like a teaspoon, or a baby spoon is good because they're kind of small. A baby spoon can kind of get in those chambers and scrape that seed out into a mason jar. I just use like a wide mouth quart mason jar. Scrape those seeds out in the mason jar. And it takes a lot of tomatoes to get a lot of seed. And once you got them in there with the pulp, they've got the tomato seeds have the little pulp on them, just like the cucumbers. That's what makes them hard to, pick up. You never can seem to pick one up off the kitchen counter when the seed gets on it because of that pulp. You got all your seeds with the pulp on them in this mason jar. Add maybe a little bit of water to it, maybe half full, 3/4 full. And I put a piece of aluminum foil on the top, not real tight because I want it to be able to breathe. Again, this is going to stink, so if you do it in your house, don't blame me. But put that foil on it just to keep the flies and stuff from laying eggs and you ended up with maggots in there or whatever. And after 2, 3, 4 days, sometimes I've gone a little bit longer, you'll see the rot starts to rise to the top, and kind of the seeds are kind of stuck to it for a while. And then You'll take that jar and kind of swish it around. All of a sudden the seeds just start falling to the bottom. The rot stays on top. Again, take that outside and pour it. You don't want to pour it down your sink. You'll have a mess. Take it outside, pour it in the yard, pour that rot off, leaving the seeds in the bottom. Put some fresh water in and just keep pouring it off and putting fresh water in until you're left with beautiful, clean, yellow tomato seeds. And then, just like with the cucumbers, you can take and pour them over an old handkerchief, because you're not going to be using it again if you do this, or a paper towel, or just whatever cloth. Put it on a plate, kind of spread those seeds out so they'll dry evenly and not clumped up on top of one another. And then once they're dry, you've got tomato seeds ready for planting. So it's kind of fun. It's not simple. It's not too entirely complicated, but it's fun. It's fun to do, something you can do about the middle or end of every summer. So, Alexander, I hope that answers your question about seed saving, the major varieties of vegetables that we might grow on our farms or homestead. Remember, my family and I operate a little store here in Cattagap, Gap Mercantile. I'd love for you, if you're ever in the neighborhood of Southwest Arkansas, to stop by. I keep a variety of seeds that I grow right here on the farm, including some heirloom seeds that have been in my family for generations. I've got several things to choose from, along with a few Baker Creek seeds that we order from Baker Creek. So come along and shop. I'm not going to mail you any. Don't ask me. I can't do it. Don't have time. But come to the store and browse through our seeds and pick out some varieties of things to carry back and grow. Now, if you have a question about seed saving, or about anything we've talked about, or about any farm question in general, please leave your question in the comment section below. I love reading all your comments. I enjoy reading those comments. I respond to them when I can. Thank you so much for commenting. Please continue to do so. Until next time, I'm Paul Mack. I'll talk at you later. Not a moose. Dang, I don't have any rocks. But on the bright side, I don't have any rocks. Peaceful Scrimp 5183. This is an unbelievably amazing video. I can't wait for civilization to collapse now. Oh, no, we don't want that.